George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
As you can see from that drone footage, winter is fast approaching. It's going to be a long, cold winter for British pensioners, at least, especially those that voted for Keir Starmer, because he promised not to cut their winter fuel allowance. And 28 Israeli helicopter gunships, quote, emptied their bellies of all their ammunition, unquote, on the revelers at the Nova Music Festival just by the wire of the Gaza concentration camp on October the 7th. That which they said was a conspiracy theory is now a proven fact. At least in Israel, you'll struggle to find it anywhere referred to in the United States or the United Kingdom for that matter. And Sarah Wilkinson, the 61-year-old lady, visited at 7 o'clock in the morning by 12 balaclavaed police officers, who then yanked her off to jail and slapped a set of bail conditions on her that horrified the nation and have now had to be dropped. And will Netanyahu, he of the tremoring hand these days, anybody notice that? Will he be forced to a ceasefire agreement by the rising tide of Israeli public opinion on the streets of Tel Aviv? All the answers are here, the best guests and the best monologue, because it is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Perhaps that tremor in Benjamin Netanyahu's left hand is a guilty conscience at work, but probably not. More likely, he's had a premonition of the future that awaits him on the Judgment Day. Or he may just have watched Australia's ABC News. For the first time in Western media, it is now proven beyond contradiction that which we conspiracy theorists alleged from October the 7th itself. It was not the Palestinian resistance that slaughtered hundreds of revelers from a music festival being held within earshot of the world's biggest concentration camp. It was the Israeli forces themselves. Take a look back at my exchange with Piers Morgan, how incredulous he was, how utterly bemused that anyone like me could possibly say on his television show that Israel killed many of the casualties on October the 7th. Take a look at the way they ridiculed all these conspiracy theorists. It's now fact. 28 helicopter gunships emptied their belly of ammunition and made at least one trip back to base each to reload with more ammunition. Any fool should have been able to see that the devastation in the car park at the festival could not possibly have been committed by lightly armed, Kalashnikov-wielding guerrilla fighters newly escaped from a concentration camp and moving, for the most part, in light vehicles or even on foot. It was not possible that they could have done that devastation. But the video has been leaked from inside the Israel Defense Forces themselves to ABC News. You can see it yourself with your own eyes. You can see the devastation. 28 helicopter gunships can deal on people, in cars, on foot. It was, as we alleged, the execution, I choose the word deliberately, of the HannibalDirective, written by Netanyahu himself, which in short reads that no Israeli hostage will be allowed to be taken into Gaza. They will be killed before that will be allowed. And boy, how they were killed. Israel has killed many, many hostages inside Gaza, but they killed hundreds. How many hundreds? We cannot yet evaluate, but that leak will not be long in coming. But that hundreds of the casualties on October 7th were caused by Israel, not by the Palestinian resistance, can no longer be denied. Therefore, it is being ignored. Not a single, not one, not a single broadcast in Britain, in the United States, far as I know, anywhere in the Western world, has aired this footage or even referred to its existence. But it's a break in the dam. It's a break in the dam of the official information blockade on what happened to the people who died on October 7th. But it's a break in the dam of the credibility of the Western sources who have lied and lied and lied again on Israel's behalf ever since. I don't need to adumbrate the foul nature of those lies. I don't have to get down amongst the 40 beheaded babies that never were. I don't have to talk about the mass rapes that never happened. I don't have to talk about the Palestinian slaughter of 1,200 people on October the 7th, because that never happened either. Sure, the proximate reason for the Israelis opening fire on their own citizens rather than see them taken prisoner was the mass breakout from the concentration camp on October 7th. That much is true. If they had not broken out, if they had agreed, as the people of the Warsaw Ghetto did not agree, to die singly in misery on their knees behind the wire, then none of this would have happened. But the people in Gaza did exactly what the people in the Warsaw Ghetto did. They rose up. They decided to break out of their ghetto. They decided that they would rather die on their feet than on their knees. They decided that they were going to make a great cry that would be heard throughout the world about the 76 years of Calvary that they have suffered in the Holy Land. And who can blame them? Would you? What would you do if you were living behind a wire whilst foreigners from Poland and Paris, from the United Kingdom and the United States and Russia were living on your land, in your house, picking fruit from your orchard? Would you stay behind the wire, or would you, as they did, and as the people of the Warsaw Ghetto did, seek to break out, even to die, at least to be seen, at least to be heard? But the consequences for Netanyahu's government of this footage is already being felt inside Israel itself, compounded by the incessant Israeli murder of their own hostages, in most cases by bombs, in which case they could claim they didn't know they were there, but as they are the world's great espionage state, that doesn't speak highly of their security services. But some, at their own hands, face to face, up close and personal, like the five, waving a white flag, speaking in Hebrew, one of them with ginger hair, who were shot down by Israeli forces who thought they were subhuman Palestinians, or the mysterious death of the hostages last week, about which I spoke on Wednesday. Look back and see my exchange with the Friends of Israel from West Sussex. You can thank me later. The impact of this footage now in the Western media is not just tragic for the young people who suffered such an appalling death, being slaughtered by their own helicopters, flown by their own Air Force, ordnance stockpiled by their own government. It's not just tragic for them. It is fatal for Israel's public relations position across the world, just as they were getting ready to transform this coming October the 7th into an international day of mourning built on the lie that the Palestinians killed 1,200 people on October the 7th. How many the Palestinians killed is yet to be revealed. I have no doubt that many were killed, but that hundreds were killed by these Israeli gunships cannot, as I said, be contradicted any longer. And so the attempt to lift off another international wave of sympathy for Israel will now be severely dented by the presence on the internet, if nowhere else, of Western media reportage, which nails the whole thing as a bright, shining lie. And you know, you can only lie for so long. When lie after lie is unmasked, when politicians like Joe Biden say on television that they have seen photographs of 40 beheaded babies and it turns out to be a lie, when Western correspondents go off on a long foray trying to touch the requisite politically correct constituencies with horrific tales of sexual violence, which then collapse under the forensic weight of heroic journalism, so that it is now the case that Joe Biden never saw it at all. Ted Cruz never saw it at all. Rishi Sunak never saw it at all, although all claimed to have seen it. They didn't see it because it never happened. There were no beheaded babies. There was only one baby killed in the entire October 7th day, and we have no idea who killed that baby and why. But it's now looking exceedingly unlikely that that one single baby was killed by a Palestinian. On the other hand, tens of thousands of babies and small children have been killed by the same Israel that built the Tower of Lies about the 40 beheaded babies. I have seen more than 40 beheaded Palestinian babies, and there are many more that I simply could not look at any longer. Every accusation turns out to be a confession. And that's leaving aside what that heroic actress, Miss Friedland, said just yesterday at her awards ceremony. This has lasted 76 years. Not 11 months, 76 years. The Palestinians have been suffering under the shadow of the Tower of Lies that is the entire basis of the existence of a state which has gathered in people whose DNA cannot legally be extracted from all over the world, in a settler, apartheid, colonial state. The natives have never accepted it. The Tasmanian natives had to be annihilated, and every last one of them was annihilated by the British settlers. Tasmania being one of those. Only 22 countries in the United Nations were never invaded and occupied by Britain. Imagine. Tasmania, they wiped out the natives. In Australia and New Zealand, they did as much as they could to annihilate the indigenous people and to marginalize the rest in lives of utter, unending misery. In the Americas, from Canada all the way to Chile, 100 million natives were annihilated, either physically or by the diseases brought by the colonizers. But the colonizers in Palestine have never been allowed a single day of rest, because, as Yasser Arafat used to say to me, we are not the Red Indians. We will not go into the museum. We will never become an ex-people. He never said truer words than that. And now Israelis are having to live with the fact that it is proving impossible for one reason or another to annihilate all 8 million Palestinians living under their iron heel. The neighboring countries, Egypt and Jordan, will not open their borders to facilitate the mass transfer dreamed of by the Likud party of power in Israel. Even this rotten world will not stand by while all 8 million Palestinians are annihilated, and so they are having to live with that with which they cannot live. They cannot sustain their power in the occupied territories except by denying all political, civil, and legal rights to the people living under them since 1967. They cannot transfer them, and despite their best efforts, they're not succeeding in physically annihilating them, so they are having to live with them, live with that with which they cannot live. Not without living permanently as an extremely violent occupier, having to dispense ever greater levels of violence in the full view of the whole world, which has now so turned against them that scarcely anyone, including the best of the Jewish people themselves, can bear to hear their name, can bear to look at their flag, can bear to see the faces and hear the voices of their leaders. They are an international pariah. I struggled against the apartheid state in South Africa. I've got to tell you, South Africa under apartheid was never remotely as hated as the apartheid state of Israel is today. So the writing is on the wall for them as the greatest of all Jews alive today said just the other day. Norman Finkelstein told them the other day that their future is now written on the wall. Increasing isolation and hatred, an exodus outwards of any Israeli with the skill set to travel, left in a circle of wagons with the savages inside the circle, not whooping around its perimeter. I don't have time to address some of the other issues that we intend to deal with tonight, but the greatest of them is the threat to freedom of speech. We have now getting on for 500,000 followers on YouTube, but our show is being offered to fewer and fewer of them every week. We are now under algorithmic strangulation by YouTube, but thankfully not by other platforms yet. And we're the lucky ones. We haven't been stopped at the airports, either coming into London or flying out of it. We have not been arrested like Mr. Durov. I've just seen him walking calmly in Paris. He seems to have made his peace, if you get my drift, with the French authorities. We have not been banned. We have not been deplatformed yet. But we'll keep speaking on whatever platform we can find, as clearly and as loudly as we are able. Others have not been quite as lucky. Sarah Wilkinson, a 61-year-old woman, was raided at 7 in the morning by 12 police officers, several of them wearing balaclavas. They disturbed her mother's ashes. They broke her Christmas lights. They took her passport, stole her money, and banned her from using the telephone or a computer. It was one of the worst in a long series of utterly ridiculous, self-defeating blunders by various British police forces. Who told them they could get away with those bail conditions? My guess, the man that let Jimmy Savile off and did his very best to send Julian Assange to a penal colony called the United States of America. Stay tuned. We've got one of those victims coming up next. Professor Danny Shaw. Boy, does he have a story to tell. Stay tuned.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As vicious as the Twitter sphere, where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Okay, we're running a poll as always. Will protests force Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire? Yes or no? 18,789 of you have voted so far, and I'm only just announcing the poll now. You can vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway. Please follow me on Telegram. You can vote on my Twitter feed, my X. You can vote on the YouTube community poll or on the YouTube stream. If you are watching on the YouTube stream or any stream that will allow you to do so, please share it now with all of your contacts, all of your friends. Tell them this show is ongoing. And the telephone numbers are toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, 08081 965522. And the worldwide number, 0044 203 966 2625. Professor Daniel Shaw is a professor of Latin American and Caribbean studies and much else besides. He is a prominent campaigner of the highest rank in the United States on all the good causes. And I'm glad to say, for the first time, he appears on the mother of all talk shows. Professor Shaw, thank you for joining us. The proximate reason for inviting you, though there are many others that we'll turn to, was what happened to you when you flew out from London from Palestine work just a couple of weeks ago. Kindly share it with the audience.
Yeah, George, how you doing? Thanks for the invite, and thank you as always for your unwavering resistance before these security states and all of the threats that they represent on this side of the Atlantic and on your side against our quote-unquote constitutional rights. About a week and a half ago, I came back from London. I was at the Free Palestine Film Festival along with Ambassador CraigMurray, Chris Nynam, and other anti-war figures. I was one of the speakers on the panels. After that, I was doing Palestine solidarity work in Indonesia and East Timor and across Southeast Asia. Upon arriving back into the United States, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security detained me, interrogated me. They confiscated my passport. They confiscated my telephone, my computer, everything I had. They made me empty my pockets. They told me I had no right to speak to my attorney. They told me I had no right to any phone call. So it became a waiting game, a battle of stubborn wills, and they were just prepared, it seemed, to abandon me there. So they would check in on me periodically. And they just kept asking questions after questions, somehow trying to link me back in London with something that would criminalize me or others. Amazing that we come together for peace and we come together to stop this genocide, but somehow we're the ones who are vilified, criminalized, and interrogated. It truly is shameful. The links across the West, whether it's Berlin, London, or Chicago, the links to which they have gone to protect their dirty little genocide, which has now expanded into the West Bank.
Indeed so. I'm wondering if London is a common denominator here. You may have a theory on it, maybe not. And it may be just as a coincidence, but coincidences are often just dressed up clues. The fact that CraigMurray, albeit in Edinburgh, that Kit Clarenberg, albeit in London, Luton, that RichardMedhurst were all detained at airports in Britain, but have never been charged, never mind tried, never mind convicted. How could they be? They're peace activists, people trying to stop a genocide. The facts are that airports are quite a dangerous place now for people like you and them to frequent. Is that part of the purpose, to make life so difficult that we'll all stay home and batten down the hatches, do you think?
I think it is, George. This is a widespread intimidation campaign. Just this past week, the United States returned back onto the college campuses. Already, Professor Catherine Franke at Columbia University, who went on Democracy Now! To denounce the IDF student chemical attacks against Palestinian protesters. Last semester, Catherine Franke has now been suspended. We have the case of Stephen Thrasher at Northwestern University, journalism professor. He was just suspended as well. His crime was trying to protect students from police when they attacked the encampment Of course, Scott Ritter, a well-known prolific critic of the U.S.-NATO proxy war on Russia and on Russia's borders and geopolitical strategic interests. So we're going through exactly what you all are going through over there. The West is in command of this genocide. They could shut down their military extension, which some call Israel, their massive jet carrier and parked dead center in the Middle East. They could shut it down at any moment. Instead, Biden and the other officials here continue to send billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars to keep this Holocaust of human life going. And all of us here in the movement, all people of good consciousness, you mentioned a number of them, Sarah Wilkinson and RichardMedhurst. These are activists. These are people who are led by integrity, journalistic integrity, and honesty. And myself, as a professor of 20 years of South American and Caribbean Studies and International Affairs, we have no intention of being quiet after 76 years of ethnic cleansing and apartheid. And as your introduction laid out, all based on a house of cards, on lie after lie and propaganda. Lance's studies tell us that now the Palestinian death toll could be in the 250,000 range, but you'll never hear that or any of this suppression of our First Amendment rights on ABC or CNN or Fox. And I know because all of them have interviewed me. And some of them have interviewed me for 30 minutes. And if they can't get what they're searching for, which is an anti-Semitic soundbite, they don't even use any of the interview. It's happened to me probably 10 times now just in the past year.
Well, there's no doubt, to paraphrase Oscar Wilde, we are two countries now united by a common language. And that language is violence, imperial power, and security and intelligence cooperation. So before we dispense with it, what happened after your detention at the airport? Has your employer stood by you? Have your attorneys any avenues of redress? Or are you supposed to just write this off?
Well, my employer is long gone. I was fired the week of Easter. I was accused because of my outspokenness and activism and organizing in the streets of the Bronx and New York City. I was fired the week of Easter. So last semester, it was under the charges of being anti-Semitic because I critiqued the genocide. That is the alibi. That's the legal justification that they're using. My legal team, my lawyers are fighting this. I have every right to critique this Israeli and Western genocide. But with John Jay College of Criminal Justice, my employer for almost 2 decades, who fired me, the president of the college leading the charge, she didn't want to go the way of the president of Harvard and UPenn, and we just saw the president of Columbia University, my alumni, was also just fired, even though she was at the beck and call of this genocidal cause of Zionism and did everything that she wanted. What John Jay College is trying to say is that I violated the civil rights. These are called Title VI investigations. They're saying that I'm a threat to the civil rights of Jewish students because I represent anti-Semitism. So I'm going to be fighting this FBI illegal detainment, the denial of my attorneys, as well as the unfair dismissal, which now happened about 5 months ago.
I said lastly, but here's another one. Were the questions intelligent questions, or were the questions being asked by a cop that didn't understand politics, didn't understand the difference, the ontology of everything, the definition? I ask because I'm interested in how high up the instructions on these kind of things come from.
Yeah, well, they do the good cop, bad cop thing. At one point, they try to be very complimentary and wow, you've traveled to so many countries and they invite you to speak. You must have so much information. They try to butter you up and they say, well, what can we get you? We'll get you anything. And I say, well, how about my children? How about my freedom? Can you get me that? I didn't stand down and, of course, give them any information. I came right at them for being complicit in this genocide of 76 years and almost 11 months now. What they're really trying to do is what's called association mapping. So they want to try to trace my entire itinerary, whether it's in London or when I was in Athens or when I was in Jakarta. And they want to see if they can somehow, through the association mapping and the forensic dumping of my phone, they had my phone for over 3 hours. Who knows what they did with it? Even if I downloaded certain apps like Telegram or Signal, they could very easily put those apps back into the phone, send it off to one of their field agents, to one of their labs. What they're really trying to do then is connect me at being at the same place, at the same movie theater, at the same restaurant as who knows who. And then if they can associate that person with somebody else, they can try to bring whatever types of criminal charges. A lot of their questions were indeed highly ignorant. It smacked of the Orientalism that my former professor, the Honorable Edward Said, wrote about so eloquently. These agents are kind of like wannabe Lawrence of Arabia's. They claim to have some great knowledge of Jenin and in Ramallah and Gaza City. They would say things that were highly ignorant, highly Islamophobic. Indefinitely, it was very clear that from their standpoint, the Palestinians are what you said earlier, the Red Indians. The Palestinians are the bad guys. And of course, the Israelis and their genocidal Western backers are the good guys. So I would say there was a combination of abject racism and ignorance, but also questions from coming on high as they can coordinate the disbursement of their F-35s and F-16s to Kiev and to Tel Aviv and to Taiwan and to Guyana, where the CIA has an operation to overthrow the Bolivarian government of Venezuela. They can coordinate their hundreds of billions of dollars in genocidal and colonial and imperial movements. But if we dare to go to a press conference across the pond in London, we're the criminals. So when we say that this is an asymmetrical war, it's an asymmetrical media war as much as it's an asymmetrical military affair as well.
Now, Professor, this week marked not the first, not even the third, I think, maybe the fifth American to be murdered by the Israelis, this time on the West Bank. The young student, if I'm not wrong, from your former university, though that may not be right, but a young American woman shot through the head, dead. Blinken have anything to say about that?
Not a peep. This was a young woman from the state of Washington. The mainstream corporate press continues to say a student of Turkish origins, trying to somehow distance her from her American citizenship. Not a peep out of Blinken. They were too busy crying, shedding their crocodile tears over the six hostages who there's ample proof that it was the Israeli themselves that went in guns ablaze and bombs ablaze and may have indeed murdered their quote unquote own people once again. So the media treatment here has been completely one-sided. That's why they're going after TikTok. They shut down when they doxed me. It's been quite a year. In addition to the detainment and being fired, I was doxed on October 20th. They took out my entire Twitter. This billionaire Zionist mafia harassed me and my family. They went after my place of employment. They made all of my co-workers, the other faculty at John Jay College, feel unsafe, and at no point did the security of the university or the NYPD lift a finger to help me or any of my colleagues who've been subjected to this harassment. So again, it's a completely one-sided affair that exposes the hypocrisy of this country that talks so much about our constitutional rights, but Americans want to know right now at these crucial periods with these issues of war and peace, which W.E.B. Du Bois called the most prolific and important issues of our age, where are the protections of our civil liberties? We have an election around the corner, 2 short months away. And I think this could be a factor in this election because Americans certainly cannot trust this government, Republican or a Democrat. They both stand squarely in defense and in the promotion of this genocide.
How can people follow you, Professor, and keep up with your work?
I'm at Prof. Danny Shaw. I put out a book, This is Genocide. I put this out back on February 1st. I've been in the world of Palestinian activism now for 3 decades, thanks to my mom, who put books and knowledge in my hands when I was a teenager. And for anyone who struggles for a better world, Palestine is a lightning rod. It's the clearest case of a David versus Goliath. And at this point, we never thought we would say this, but David versus a genocidal Goliath. So we hope that we can continue to make the connections between all these different causes around the world against imperialism and against colonialism with the Palestinian cause. It's clear that the Western governments are not going to stop this genocide. So it's incumbent upon us. It's our historical duty to stay in the streets, continue to advocate on social media, in the classroom, on the street corners, meeting with our families. So we look forward to doing that with everybody who's watching now.
Brilliant. Professor Daniel Shaw, thank you very much indeed for coming on for the first time, but not the last, I hope, the mother of all talk shows. Terrific. Professor Daniel Shaw. Will protest force Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire? 20,398 of you have spoken. Most of you, it's fair to say, so far, think not. Let's take a quick break and then it's your calls right up to the hour. Well, first of all, Bob Geldof and his good friend Bono are on the other side. It wasn't for South Africa, it was for the Horn of Africa. I was involved in it at the time. That was my job at the time. There were many differences. First of all, it was easy because of Cold War politics to take a stand on the famine in sub-Saharan Africa in 1984-85. I did so myself, but it was easy to do. There was no Ethiopian lobby smearing you as an anti-Ethiopian racist if you got involved in it. There was absolutely gale-force wind of free publicity from the newspapers and the television about the famine in Africa at that time. There is zero publicity in the mainstream media about the calvary being undergone by the Palestinian people in 2024. Thirdly, the artists involved lost nothing and arguably gained much by being involved in that charitable enterprise. Artists today lining up for Palestine, like the great Eric Clapton, like the great Roger Waters, and I'm running out of names already, would not only not be benefiting from putting on a Live Aid for Palestine, their careers would be destroyed, would be brought to a shuddering halt if they did. So I'm afraid none of the conditions which made possible the Live Aid phenomenon exist over Palestine. Indeed, quite the contrary.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Big breaking news on the podcast this week. We passed 1 million downloads yesterday. We're in the top 40 in France this week too, charting in countries and territories all over the world. You can download the MOATS podcast on your screen now by scanning the QR code. Now, Walter in Blackpool has an opposing point of view to mine on October 7th. That's why he's up first. Walter, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Well, first of all, George, I'd like to make an apology that I couldn't stand for the Workers' Party in Blackpool because the election caught me in the middle of the university marking season. So it's my livelihood, and I'm sorry about that. Yeah, okay. But on October the 7th. Now, I'm very pleased that what you said about the music festival and about the Israeli killing their own people has been vindicated, yeah? Now, let's cast our minds back to your by-election in Rochdale. Yeah, your opponent in the Labour Party, Mr. Ali, who is an honourable man, I know him, he's an honourable man, said that the Israelis let it happen. And the thing is, George, are you going to tell me that a gaggle of paragliders, heavily armed paragliders, can waltz across the Gaza border and not be shot down in pieces and even be able to penetrate deep into Israeli territory to capture all these hostages? Come on.
No, you may be right. And as I said at the time when the hapless Mr. Azhar Ali was defenestrated by Keir Starmer, that while I don't believe his theory that Israel allowed it to happen was correct, it certainly wasn't anti-Semitic, and it was a view widely held in Israel itself. It is possible that Israel allowed it to happen, willed it to happen, but I doubt it. It would seem to me a question of overkill. Netanyahu could have done what he has done with a tenth, a tiny percentage of the death toll on October 7th. If not 1,200, but 12 Israelis had been killed in a breakout, Netanyahu would have had no problem at all in the world selling that as a casus belli for a re-invasion of the Gaza Strip. 1,200 ran the risk, and it has indeed come to pass, of engendering widespread, massive opposition to his rule and to his role in all the events from October 7th onwards. So I doubt it, but it could be true. Just as it could be true that some of the conspiracy theories around 9/11 and around many other things could be true. And we won't know, perhaps for some time, whether or not Netanyahu's regime willed a breakout on the 7th of October. What I reject, and I reject it to you as I did to Azhar Ali, I reject it wherever it is stated. To deny the agency of the Palestinian resistance in staging a breakout of their own concentration camp, most of them sacrificing their lives in that breakout, is an Orientalist point of view. It reduces the Palestinian resistance to the kind of rule of patsies, of stooges. And I don't believe that that is true. The people who broke out were breaking out for the same reason that the people broke out of the Warsaw Ghetto. And they had the agency to do that. They had the historic justification for doing so in both cases. And I believe if a duck looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And the breakout by the Palestinian resistance on October 7th probably was just that. Thank you, Walter. In any case, comments about Netanyahu. Rachel Thompson says, psychopaths can't feel guilt. Indeed. But I wonder what that tremor is all about. Crowhawk says, Adolf Hitler also had a tremor in his left hand. Indeed, now that you come to mention it, he did. Ben Johnson says, Israeli police blocked the roads to prevent the people from fleeing the attack. And Jack Klugman, great name, says, why do you think they shredded and buried the cars? Look at the pictures. What's burned wasn't done by guys in flip-flops on bicycles and on paragliders. And of course that's right. I omitted to mention that just for the avoidance of doubt, they literally buried all the cars under 6 feet of earth. But that won't stop them being disinterred one day. Madeline Tan, I knew this was coming. Red Indian is an insult to the indigenous people of North America. This is what the Bilganas, the white colonizers, used to call them. I know. I was quoting Arafat. It's not politically correct. But then, I don't think you missed the meaning of it. Online too, Asa in Idaho on U.S. hypocrisy. Go ahead, Asa.
Hey, George Galloway. I'm sort of stunned that I was able to get through, and I think that you're an amazing gentleman. When I was in the Marines in the 90s, and we went to Somalia, I was there for the evacuation. And just one of the things that just stunned me was how we dishonored our enemies and just disrespected them all the time. And after I decided I had to get out because I saw how we complained about, we were bemoaning the 70 Americans in the first Gulf War, but didn't care about the 100,000 that we killed. And I thought that the honor, it showed that we were just setting up this demonization of everyone. And that's what we're doing in Gaza. We're doing that with Russia. And there's no attempt to try and learn to understand, but they've been, anyway, let me backtrack for a second here. I'm sort of stunned that I got on the show with you.
Don't worry, Asa, and I got your essential point, and let me respond to it. When Hollywood gets to work, it will get even worse, because having lived through the Vietnam era myself as an active political figure, I watched in astonishment that in the Hollywood iteration, Americans were acting more in sorrow than in anger in Vietnam, and in fact were partly reproaching the Vietnamese for forcing them to behave so out of character and to commit such appalling acts, almost blaming the Vietnamese for forcing them to do to the Vietnamese that which they did. Where you and I, Asa, know that the truth is, this is entirely in character, not just with the United States Empire, but with the British Empire before it. Scorpions sting because they're scorpions. Empires slaughter because they're empires. And it doesn't matter if the person being slaughtered is Vietnamese or indigenous American or black African in Somalia or Arab in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, or Afghan. It doesn't matter. They're slaughtered with the same gusto, accompanied by the same imperialist propaganda machine, riddled with racist supremacist ideas. Last word to you, Asa.
I had a good friend who was also in the Marines, and all he did was complain about the rules of war and how they couldn't just kill at wanton, and how all these laws just helped everyone else. And if only we didn't have the Geneva Convention, then we could just use everything at full force. And I'm just sitting there like, they're arguing the reasons for the war is the Geneva Convention, but then they don't want to use the Geneva Convention when they employ the war.
Amazing. Imagine how many they would have killed if there were no rules at all. Asa, thank you, in Idaho. Alan is in Palm Beach on the Hannibal Directive. Go ahead, Alan.
Yes. Hi, George. From the last time we spoke, I have gone through epiphany. My epiphanies have had epiphanies. So I have ended up in the psychiatric hospital, just trying to explain to my own family how we are benefiting from not just the slaughter of the Palestinians, but that we ourselves are diaspora of Latin American intervention. And the diaspora here of Latin Americans in Florida and indeed the entire United States is trying to conduct cost-benefit analysis of their own lives without taking into account that we're just able to barely exist with the crumbs that the billionaire class allows to trickle down to us. And, it has come to my attention that we have to really convince the American people. That's who really holds the nuclear weapons. That is who is the threat to the species. And it is becoming increasingly impossible to do so from within the United States. I'm actually going through the process of relocating to Venezuela as an American citizen that studied here, that worked here, that has gone insane for 16 years trying to explain this to my own family with little or no progress. So I have come.
Well, I wish you all the best, Alan. I'd have relocated to Russia rather than Venezuela myself, but I wish you the best of luck. It's not quite as far away, I know. Comments now. Melissa Dirlish says they just sniped a Turkish-American activist in the West Bank, a 26-year-old girl from Seattle, and Erdogan condemned it. What a joke the investigation will be. I'm losing the last part of the sentences on my screen, if someone can attend to that. Paul Meany says, GG, given the grossly inept, corrupt ICC had failed to prosecute Netanyahu and Western genocide Holocaust war criminals responsible for genocide against the Palestinians, is the ICC complicit too? Of course, it's lipstick on a pig, that's all. Crowhawk says the most sinister aspect of Sarah Wilkinson's arrest was the police asking for her contacts in Gaza. Who tasked them to obtain that information and for what purpose? A very, very good question. Last call before Garland Nixon. It's Lance in Canada on censorship. Go ahead, Lance.
Hello, George. I just wanted to say, I did want to say also what I always say it in some way, that I'm just proud to know that there's, somebody with your strength in the world.
Thank you.
I think the censorship thing is coming with a jackhammer, and I don't know. Like when I talk to sort of people outside of my close circle of friends, propaganda does seem to work, and I don't know. I think the world is stuck, and I do think that it really won't stop until there is some sort of massive war or people just buy everything they're told. But I think censorship is coming with a hammer, and people are going to start going to jail and disappearing. sadly.
Yeah, I don't know, Lance, how many people buy it. All I can do is compare this era with eras through which I have lived and been active and been in the midst of intense controversies, some of which, viz the hat, cost me blood, others of which cost me jobs. I was just reflecting today that I lost 2 paid jobs as a columnist over my support for Julian Assange, my denouncing of the fake rape allegations against him, and then blackballed, blacklisted by everyone from the Cuba Solidarity Campaign through the Palestine Solidarity Campaign to the Stop the War campaign, which I had myself co-founded. I was thinking when Danny was talking there, does nobody ever ask at these Palestine film festivals why I'm not on the platform? Does nobody ever ask in Trafalgar Square, where I, who used to be on every platform, are now on none? I compare the atmosphere today with the atmospheres through which I have lived. And my analysis leads me to this conclusion, Lance. There are many sheep, and they will go onto the back of the truck on the way to the abattoir, bleating in unison, in harmony and in happiness until they die. But there are more conscious people in the world today than there have ever been. And there are large swathes of the world where real consciousness is hegemonic. From Burkina Faso to Russia, from China to Venezuela, from one part of the so-called global south to another, our attitudes, yours and mine, are completely hegemonic. Sure, there are agents on the payroll of the empire, but they never succeed, and they will never succeed in overthrowing the prevailing power in those countries. So, in vast swathes of the world, we are hegemonic. In our part of the world, which is, I remind you, 13% only of the world's population, and only 9% of the world's children, sure, we're up against it. Most people have not yet understood, and many of them are literally sheep, docile, completely lying on their back with their 4 legs in the air, and I won't continue the metaphor. But if you add it up, the swathes of the world, plus the conscious people in our part of the world, that's not a bad platform. And if not in your lifetime or mine, in the lifetime of our children, I am sure that we will prevail. Thanks, Lance. In Canada, the one and only Garland Nixon comes up next. Do I need to say any more than that? Stay tuned. If you want to join me on Have It Out with Galloway, you can be the audience member on that video wall so that I can see as well as hear you. Come and have it out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
That show's really taking off now. I hope you watch it on Tuesday evenings at 7 o'clock. I hope you'll phone in on the video wall and actually be on the show. That takes place on Mondays. So write to me at haveitoutwithgalloway.com. gmail.com. The poll is picking up steam also. 21,000 votes cast now. Most of you don't think that Netanyahu gives a damn. Garland Nixon, radio talk show host, political analyst, and long-time friend of ours on the mother of all talk shows. Garland, welcome. Welcome back. I want to talk to you mainly about the electoral season, but I wanted to ask you first, I asked Professor Danny Shaw this. That young girl, student, American citizen, shot through the head by an Israeli soldier. Not a word of condemnation from your government, and instead an insidious media attempt to deracinate her, to place the prefix Turkish. She's Turkish, don't you know? Not a real American. It's pretty disgusting, isn't it?
Yes, and what we're seeing is a government that cracks down on its people when they push back against the policies. We have the people in America who, over the course of their lives, have been taught that this is a democracy and that they have a right to input into the activities of their government. But what we found is that when people push back against the violent actions of the United States, both here and abroad, that the U.S. simply cracks down on the people, and it's getting more and more clear to the American people that their input is not wanted by their government, and that we are, unfortunately, rather than members of the U.S. government state, more than citizens of the U.S. government state, if we push back, we become victims of the U.S. government state.
Yeah, an enemy within, but there's rather a few of you. And some of them, like you, like Shaw, like Ritter, like Hinkle, and many others, are achieving stratospheric levels of audience. So their crackdown isn't really working, is it?
No, and a very important trial that I think people need to pay attention to, that a lot of people aren't focusing on now, is there's a group called the African People's Socialist Party, also known as the Uhuru Movement, and it's a fairly small black freedom organization. It's a socialist organization. They do a lot of work in very poor black neighborhoods, building basketball courts, and they have programs for when people get out of prison to help them to learn skills to get a job, very productive things of that nature. And the government of the United States decided that they were puppets for the Russian government, and their trial is going on right now in St. Petersburg, Florida. I know a number of people who are covering the trial. I understand that the federal government is having difficulty proving their case. We're looking for the Uhuru Movement's defense counsel to begin their defense probably Monday or Tuesday, but I think people should pay attention to that case, should go to their websites and support it in any way that they can. But that's a very important trial, because if the government loses that trial, I think it demonstrates that there is some room still in the courts of the United States for some level of justice, albeit, a court that we don't trust very much. And that certainly, we didn't want to get Assange there, and we don't want to get any of our beloved brethren that are working on behalf of the Palestinians into our courts, because we don't trust them. But all that being said, the Department of Justice has not been very good at prosecuting these cases. So we're supporting the Uhuru Movement and hoping for the best.
Ironic that it's in St. Petersburg, Florida. Was that ever called Leningrad? I joke. The efforts to destroy Trump in the courts are not going well either, are they?
No, the latest thing that has happened is that the trial in New York, Donald Trump was supposed to be sentenced. Certainly the Democrats were hoping for that to happen as quickly as possible so they could ideally get Donald Trump put in jail before the election. The judge has determined that it's in the best interest of all to push that sentencing back until after the election, so that there is not the appearance, which clearly, obviously, there is not the appearance of interference with the election. I think here, the big election news is going to come Tuesday night, when Donald Trump goes face to face with Kamala Harris in a debate. I think there are many of us who have been watching Kamala Harris over the course of the years and have great questions about her, shall we say, rhetorical skills, are expecting a performance that will, similar to that of Joe Biden, some kind of a debacle and a collapse based on the kinds of things that we've seen her do recently in interviews, et cetera.
Well, unless the questions are about the problem of getting your lipstick on the white lids of a Starbucks coffee cup. I heard her speak very eloquently about that. But looking at the one interview that she has done, highly coached, accompanied by a waltz, and truncated, censored, to show her in the best possible light, it wasn't a very flattering light, was it?
In fact, it was a disaster, and it was the usual Kamala Harris. She doesn't answer questions, but as a politician, there's nothing wrong with not answering questions as a politician. There's a skill that many politicians have where they cannot answer a question in a very artful and skillful way. What Kamala tends to do is kind of get lost, start wandering and meandering, and trying to use platitudes and metaphors that she gets lost in, and at some point they make no sense. So there are those of us looking at that. Certainly the inside information that we hear is that 20-minute interview was actually a 1-hour interview, and about 40 minutes of it was cut. And if that was the best 20 minutes, then she's in a world of trouble when she goes to head with Donald Trump.
Although I still feel he's kind of lost a bit of his mojo. What do you think?
Well, in the original, in the first debate with Joe Biden, he did seem a bit subdued. He didn't seem as aggressive as he is. He didn't seem as dominant as he has been in the past. But then again, he didn't have to, because he could kind of get out of the way and let Joe Biden crash. And I think in this particular instance, there will be something similar, wherein if he kind of answers slightly on the questions, if he kind of gets out of the way and just says what he needs to say, I think he can get out of the way and allow Kamala Harris to shine or to crash, as it were. And I think that probably is the plan.
The polls are all headed his way, particularly in the swing states. Massive leads in some of those swing states. It'll all be for nothing, of course, if the election is rigged on the night. How big a concern is that?
Well, there's a tremendous concern, and there are many of us who, for years, have been, screaming about the election machines. We have computers that are used for the elections that the people have no way of knowing how it works out. They have software that is proprietary. So it's very, very easy to rid this election using the election machines. We actually had a case a few years back where one of our friend of mine was challenging Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and after the election, they found that this person got exactly the same percentage of votes across all demographics, every demographic in the computer, which is virtually impossible. He then asked for the images of the votes to be shown in court, as is required by law, and the government destroyed the images so they could never be seen in court, and the court did not act or prosecute anybody for that. So certainly we don't trust the election. I do recall, for all of his faults, I can quote Barack Obama when in 2008, when they asked him, what if somebody tries to rig it? And he says, you have to beat them so bad they can't rig it. And I think that's Donald Trump's only out. He has to have enough of a lead that makes it difficult for them to rig it, which many of us believe is exactly what happened in 2016, to be quite frank.
Yeah, and maybe even in 2020 also, but that's another story. Russiagate balloon has been hoisted again. People have been arrested and blacklisted. They've been told that they must register as foreign agents and the rest. Apparently, there was a lot of money put into a company in the south somewhere Tenet Media, was it? I've never heard of it before, but they were paying good money, Garland. How come we didn't get any of that work?
You know, that's what I keep hearing from people that are accused of being, you know, Russian agents and Russian spies and sympathizers to Putin. The question is always the same. How come I didn't get my share out of that if I'm going to be accused of it? But the reality is it's a very strange case, because once again, what we have is the DOJ saying, I'm going to charge some people that are not in the United States, that will never come here, so I don't have to prove my case. I'm going to make an allegation against some shady firm that allegedly gave money to another somewhat shady journalist firm. Again, no one's been charged there, so there's not going to be a case, so we don't really know what's behind it. And what happens all too often in Russiagate is you get allegations, you get assertions, but they don't have to go to court, they don't have to prove anything, and so it just kind of drifts off into the ether. Let's not forget, in August, we were getting, people can go out there and search for the articles, we were getting allegations that China and Iran were involved in election interference. We've got these crazy articles saying, well, China wants, China wants Biden, Iran wants Harris, China wants Harris, Iran wants Harris, Russia wants Trump. I mean, this thing has gone to a level of absurdity where basically all of the political hacks all are setting the stage so that when and if their candidate loses, they will have the appropriate adversarial country to blame it on. It's just like they're tacking this on to neocon foreign policy so that whatever happens, they'll have some additional manner that they can use to go after their named adversaries.
Whereas Netanyahu wants both to win or either to win, doesn't give a damn which of the two wins, because both of them are in his pocket. AIPAC have spent $100 million on this election cycle alone, and it's still September.
Yeah, and the reason being, I think, is this, because he's a member of the imperial team, you know, in the same way, one of the things that's been discussed is whether or not Benjamin Netanyahu will respond to the Israelis, to the citizens in the street, which implies that there would be democracy in Israel. And I would ask this: has the German government responded to the German people and their election? No. Has Macron responded to the French people and that election? No. Recently, the Prime Minister of Japan had to step down. Why? Because rather than stand up for what the people of Japan wanted, he decided he'd quit first. What we're seeing is the U.S. and its so-called allies, but which are really colonial powers. None of them respond to their citizens. They all work for the U.S. empire, and the U.S. empire is an ideology of its own that puts in managers of the empire, but it doesn't really have, even the word president, it means preside over the empire, not guide or control the empire. So I think we're talking again, the term imperialism gets used too much, but I think right now it's more appropriate than ever, looking at the dynamics of the U.S. government and the countries that it controls.
Sure is. Garland Nixon, thanks as always for being on the mother of all talk shows. A quick break, and then it's your calls all the way to Gayatri.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the Flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Are you supporting me on Patreon yet? Patreon.com/George Galloway. If not, why not? You don't want to spend the price of a cup of tea to keep this show on the road. You don't think I'm worth the price of a cup of tea? Let's take a call from Ontario, where someone wants to fight with me. Gerasimo. Oh dear, that sounds fearsome. Gerasimo, what have you got to say for yourself?
Hi, George. The name means the old wise one, and I'm a little bit older than you. I just want to comment on the fact that you tend to exaggerate numbers, and that diminishes from the wonderful work that you do. For example, you said that 100 million indigenous people were killed in North America. Maybe you meant North America and South America.
No, stop. If you're going to upbraid me, you're going to have to quote me correctly. I said from Canada to Chile. That's not North America. Go on.
The figure by David Smith from the University of Houston is that the maximum amount of people that were killed due to disease and colonial settler fascism was 65 million people, not 100 million people. Now,
so you say 65 million. Hold on. You say 65 million. I say 98 million. I have my sources. You've got yours. 65 million is one hell of a lot of people killed by colonialism in the Americas. Can we agree on that?
Oh, absolutely. It's awful. And it continues to this day with this horrible fascist psychopathic regime in Israel. This is beyond imagination. This man, Netanyahu, is a psychopath. And I'm a retired psychiatrist, and I would know what a psychopath is. And he is a psychopath. And the whole Israeli nation is sick with
Now, don't exaggerate, Gerasimo. That's the very sin you accuse me of. No, look, it was once said of me that I cannot see a sparrow without hailing it as an eagle. I cannot look at a blackbird without denouncing it as a vulture. I'll accept that I can sometimes get a bit carried away and be the opposite of economical with the actuality. That's true. But do you realize that you came on here to say that only 65 million people were killed by colonialism in the Americas amongst the indigenous, whereas I claim it's 98? Many people would think you were quibbling, Gerasimo. Let's take some more comments. Aniron Davies says, when exposing a crime is treated as committing a crime, then we are being ruled by criminals. Edward Snowden. In fact, Aniron, I think you'll find it was me who said that first, and there's a video on YouTube to prove it. James Klugman says, the useless anti-Semite smear has become a badge of honor. It means you have a shred of humanity. And Nicola Curtin says, how close to the end of the genocide in Gaza do you think we are? Same question regarding Ukraine. I suspect you think we are as far away as ever. Yes, to the first, but not to the second. I think we're quite close to the end game in the Ukraine, but we're a very long way away from the end game in occupied Palestine. You can't handle the truth says they don't care about the USS Liberty and the servicemen that killed. You think they will care about her? Your so-called elected puppets don't represent you, but represent their corporate donors. G is in Leeds, in England, on October the 7th. Go ahead, G.
Hello, George. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Right. What I want to talk about, I know you may say it's conspiracy theory. But there's a video on YouTube, and Netanyahu is talking in his own Israeli language, and he's talking about attack on Gaza and substantial damage. So all this, if you have a look at this video, I don't know if you know about this video, it just all points towards the inside organised attack by Israel. What's your thoughts?
Well, not necessarily, G, although possibly, as I said to the caller from Blackpool. Netanyahu has been attacking Gaza for the best part of 20 years. So he could have been talking at any point in time in the last 20 years. And when he's speaking in Hebrew, he does tend to be rather more frank than when he's talking in his native American language. But the truth is that my previous reply stands on October 7th until proved otherwise. Ditto my view on 9/11 and so on. When the facts change, so do my opinions, as Groucho Marx once said. Karen is in Toronto on polio in Gaza. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you, George. George, I'm also very appreciative of your speaking about the reality of October 7th. Too many people have taken the assumption. I'd like to talk about my suspicion that Israel's military pause is not necessarily wholly beneficial. Vanessa Beeley has pointed out that the children of Gaza are being given Bill Gates' oral polio vaccine, which has a reputation for being very dangerous, as documented by the 2012 Indian Journal of Medical Ethics and also by the World Health Organization in 2020 with their experience of new vaccine-related cases in Chad and Sudan, which are very worrying.
I don't know anything about these things, Karen, but in any case, there is no humanitarian pause for the polio vaccinations. It was always something that they agreed to under duress. They agreed to for some self-interested reasons, no doubt, but there was never the possibility of 1 million children being immunized in 1 year. Now, I know nothing about the provenance of the vaccine. You say it's Bill Gates supplied. I don't know about that. I do know that there are a lot of people who are against all vaccinations, who are against immunization, who don't believe in vaccines. And I don't want that to bleed into the Gaza question. I really don't. So I'm not going to take issue with what you have said, not least because I'm far from an expert on it. But I know about polio. I've seen polio. I've seen the effects of polio. I grew up alongside people who got polio, and we have to stop it in its tracks in Gaza if we can. Now, comments, Karen, here. Karen, thanks for the call. Karaoke stars, Netanyahu is not Jewish, he is a Zionist. There's a huge difference. He's hell-bent on condemning the entire world against the Jews. The Jewish community must rid themselves of this extremism. And Susan Mercurio says, why don't members of Congress have to register as agents of a foreign government for receiving AIPAC money? Terrific. Mastermind Hour says AIPAC got the green light not to register as a foreign agent in Dallas in 1963. Monkey Boy says Israel has a right to defend itself against people who may witness its war crimes and report the truth. Now, Simon from Weaponized News He's got an important update on China and Africa. Wow, what a turnout there was, Simon, in the every African leader, every one, was at the China conference. That is really something. Tell us.
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience. And this is indeed why you and I obviously try and give your audience the heads up on events in advance, not just telling them what happened days later. And I'm most grateful to you for the opportunity in helping to do that. So in particular, with the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, which occurred in the last week, finished on Friday, we had several conference documents that were published at the end, the main two of which were the summit declaration and then the action plan for the implementation of the summit declaration. I appreciate those may be somewhat dry and technical, but despite being immensely long, I did have the opportunity to read all of the documents, in some cases more than once. And three things that really stand out that unfortunately, with other journalists with less time or less inclination to delve into the hundreds of paragraphs of translated Mandarin, didn't actually notice was the entire of Africa not only acknowledged or expressed appreciation or nodded their hat to the Chinese Global Security Initiative, which includes not only military aspects, but also anti-terrorism, food security, energy security, cyber security, negotiations on the use of AI, nuclear security, all of those definitions of security in its broadest term. But they have actually agreed as a continent to implement it over the next 3 years. Now, that does include military officer exchanges, joint exercises, technology transfers, and so forth. So that's a huge setback to the United States, otherwise known as the hegemon. But two other issues that, once again, might seem obscure, but in terms of the value and the use of the US dollar, and indeed the price of goods in Europe, are very, very important. And those were not just the proposal, but the agreement to establish a interbank payment system. So like if somebody was sending the money from NatWest London to Banque National Paribas in Paris, for example, that wouldn't be done using the US dollar, but starting from scratch, much like SWIFT did with only 15 banks in the 1970s and grew to now 11,000 financial organizations. The Chinese are going to help set up both the technology and the staffing of a system such as that, but it won't be denominated in US dollars. It will be denominated for the whole of Africa for interbank payments between countries in the Chinese yuan. So a huge step towards de-dollarization, which obviously prevents the US State Department and the US Treasury from either seizing African countries' US dollar accounts in New York or indeed putting effective sanctions even on individual businesses. So very significant indeed for the whole continent. The next one, and the final one, I'll leave you with this thought, is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, otherwise known as CBAM, which is going to start being implemented in Europe just next year, so in only a few months' time. And the idea behind that is that if goods are made more cheaply in lesser developed nations, not just because of lower wages, but because they might use electricity made from the burning of coal or gas, as opposed to expensive solar power or nuclear in Europe. The idea is for those countries not to have what's called by economists a competitive advantage, namely on the final product price, but for everything to be equalized in terms of its environmental impact, such that substantial tariffs will be put on goods being sent from Asia and Africa to Europe. And that's the only way the European Union thinks that they can survive net zero, because otherwise everyone who works in a factory, both in Britain and in the European Union, will be out of a job because they've made their energy sources so incredibly expensive. And so it has been agreed between China and almost every country in Africa that they will push back on what they call environmental discrimination to the disadvantage of the global south and use every legal avenue they have available in organizations like the World Trade Organization that is currently being sabotaged by America because they don't like it when countries find a loophole in the rules-based international order.
Well, there you go. Amen to all of that. Simon from Weaponized News, another roundup. There used to be an advert when I was young. The car in front is a Toyota. The country in front is China. Let's go to Sylvie, who's in Melbourne, where it is very early in the morning indeed. Sylvie, a big welcome to you. What's on your mind?
Thank you, George. Look, what is on my mind is, and I'm very unprepared for this because I just threw myself out of bed and said, well, look, I'm going to do it or bust. So here I am, nearly a year, protesting every week. I'm 79 years old. I've got serious health issues, so if I can do it, everybody else can. The numbers here are dwindling, and I'm wondering, this is in Melbourne, I'm wondering if it's possibly because people are losing heart, but I go and people are just doing their best. The spineless Albanese government, this traitor to the people of Australia, is not listening. The media is corrupt. They don't want to know. They're not telling you. So we have to do something. We have to do more. We have to marshal our resources. We have to get out there. Now, this is what I've been doing, and I don't know whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. But every time there's a public gathering and I'm there, if I'm on public transport, if I'm in a shopping mall, if I'm in a shop with a few people, I have a few words to say. I just say, excuse me, if you've got a minute, I'd like to tell you something. Then I have a prepared spiel to say, look, this is what's happening. You're being lied to. If you don't believe me, most of you have access to social media. You can get on. You can find out the truth. You can call me a liar, you can do anything you like, but don't sit on your phones and do nothing. Don't listen to mainstream media because they lie to you constantly. Okay, so you have to speak up. You mustn't be afraid. You mustn't feel embarrassed that people will laugh at you, turn away from you, not answer you, say something rude to you. Don't let that worry you. It's really difficult when you're not in a crowd to stand up alone and speak, but you have to do it. I steel myself, and sometimes I think, I can't do this today, I can't do this today, and then I think, if I don't do it, I'll be ashamed of myself. That's all I can say. There's a big
but we are all extremely proud of you. So much so, Sylvie, I am going to elevate you right this moment to the status of legend. You are now the legend Sylvie in Melbourne. You should be proud of yourself, of your moral courage, even if you are the last person standing in Melbourne, which I pray is a situation that will never come. Moral courage will, after a long life, stand you in good stead in the judgment day in which I believe. Whether you believe it or not is a different matter, but even if you don't believe there will be a judgment day, you have lost nothing. To the contrary, you have gained the respect of every person who listened to your telephone call here today. My 7-year-old daughter was invited to a McDonald's today. She was not with us. She was invited to a McDonald's, and she proudly announced that we don't go to McDonald's because of their support for what's happening to the children in Gaza. I was very, proud of her, and I hope she's still awake at the end of this show so I can tell her. The legend that is Sylvie in Melbourne. A legend is born. Rashid is in Indiana, but wants to talk about Algeria. I tell you, it is the global university of the airwaves. Rashid, go ahead.
George, I cannot thank you. Really, not only me, the world, thank you for all what you're doing and the courage you have. And your words are not zigzag, straightforward. And that, I appreciate that. I want to tell you also about Mr. Green has been charged again. That's for you to know, for holding a candle at IU and with his buddies, just holding candles. He was charged again. That's for your knowledge, and I wish
Bryce
everybody
Green has been charged with holding a candle.
Candles, they were holding candles in the evening, and because of the T-shirt, you're not supposed to speak about Palestine or whatever. It's just T-shirt. What in it? Believe it or not, holding visual candles, you get charged. This is sick. This is mind-boggling. Where is the democracy? United States is based on freedom of speech. And if you cannot wear a T-shirt, I don't understand which world they're living in. That's total hypocrisy. I mean, to that point, he cannot, hold candles. I mean, this is more peaceful than that. That's what I was heard.
Well, I'll tell you what. We have many friends in the United States who are all collectively holding a candle for freedom, not just in distant Palestine, but down home in Indiana, down home in the cities, towns, villages, and hamlets of the United States. These candles may all be extinguished. I fear that if the Democrats win in November, that no meaningful freedom of speech or assembly will long remain in the United States. And it's one of the reasons, it's not the only one, but it's one of the reasons that I say anybody but Harris. Elect anybody, vote for anybody but Kamala Harris. This scourge of the Biden-Harris administration must be rooted out from the United States if freedom is to survive. Rashid, thank you for that melancholy news. We'll have to check in with Bryce to see how he is. Bob is in London on Palestine. Bob, welcome.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Galloway. It was always nice to hear your voice. You are a remarkable man. And I hope you continue for this work, probably forever. I got 3 questions for you, Mr. Galloway, and I am dealing with it very quickly. The first one, it will never be peace in Palestine as long the Zionist people, you're quite right to use Zionist instead of Jewish, will be there because the land belonged to Palestine. And they were in Germany, I told you that before, and Hitler expelled them. That's the.
Well, he didn't so much expel them as attempt to exterminate them. And he exterminated people like you and me also, Bob. Hitler sought to exterminate whole classes of people, disabled people, homosexual people, Jehovah's Witnesses, communists, trade unionists, social democrats, anyone who opposed the foul tyranny of Nazism was categorically exterminated. And 6 million Jews were exterminated. So it's beyond ironic. It is supremely ironic It is unbelievably ironic that a country calling itself the Jewish state, a nomenclature we reject, you and me, calling itself the Jewish state should be behaving in ways which are captured often on their own telephones, posted by themselves on social media outfits, which betray a level of fascistic depravity such as would have been captured if the technology had existed to do so in the Nazi Holocaust against, amongst others, millions of Jewish people. Bob, thanks for the call. My good wife is here, right next to me. Gayatri, what's rattling?
Will protests force Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire? Well, most of the audience voted towards no in this poll. Robin Hansman says, as a retired clinical psychologist, okay, I would define a psychopath as a person characterized by a lack of empathy, remorse, and guilt, having thereby a tendency towards various forms of antisocial behavior, which may include imprisonment, torture, or serial killing of other human beings. If this cap fits any high-ranking politicians currently operating on the world stage, beware, they can be very dangerous to world peace. Such individuals tend to double down rather than stop.
Yeah,
so there you go.
Psychopaths continue to be psychopaths until they're stopped and until they are incarcerated, either in Ward 5 of Broadmoor, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or on death row, or on life without parole. That's how you have to stop a psychopath. I don't think you can cure one.
Well, in this case of Netanyahu Ferims, on Rumble says Israel is an American military base in the Middle East. The world must know that our empire will never stop sending arms to our military base called Israel. I have lost hope for America unless China or Russia topples our empire. Injustice all over the world will continue.
Well, not all over the world, all over our part of the world, or the parts of the world that our part of the world continues to control. We still have an empire, shrunken as it is. There are places where our writ still runs, where the rulers of those countries are ruling on our behalf rather than on behalf of their people. But there are whole swathes of humanity now liberated from the empire.
And growing too.
Yeah.
Graham Briggs White also has a more positive message. He says, I think that the number of people protesting will only rise, as most people can see that Israel is under an existential crisis. Netanyahu is keeping this conflict going to save his own skin and from being thrown into a toll booth somewhere. The world's public can see the crimes of these fascists, and I cannot see Israel existing for much longer the way it is going. The US are very well known to cut and run when they know they have nowhere to go in the end.
Did you see Sarah Friedland's speech?
Of course, we watched it.
Unbelievably
powerful. In awe we were.
If you haven't seen it yet, you must. She was being given an award, and she devoted the entirety of her remarks as an American Jew speaking for Palestine, and my goodness, not a dry eye in the house.
Yeah, exactly.
She'll be remembered forever.
Forever, and the good thing is no one seemed to have protested her speech.
No, that was
which would have been.
She'd have been arrested in Britain.
Exactly.
If she'd said it at the Labour conference, she'd definitely have been expelled.
Michelle Blocher in Oregon says, George, thank you for your words that ring true. Godspeed and all the best to you and your bride. And Prime Timer also says, I love your optimism, George. I do believe that once consciousness is awoken, it is almost impossible to go back asleep.
That's true. Yeah.
Very true. This one on Kamala, because we discussed it earlier with Garland, who described it very aptly. Cal from Stoke-on-Trent says, George, I cannot see Kamala Harris being the next president of the US in a million years. She's getting caught out by the American public. whenever she's being asked a question, she just laughs and she just doesn't give any answers.
Yeah.
And I think
it's got her quite far, though.
I think the White
House is the Vice President of the United States and the Democrat nominee.
Yeah, she is.
To me, you're too young to remember Dan Quayle. She's a female Dan Quayle, who George Bush Sr. Picked as his vice president because he looked all right until he started speaking.
Yeah. But the chances of her obviously winning the presidential election is based on the fact that she can be controlled. And Trump, however much wrong on our side he is or right on their side he is, he's uncontrollable. He's just a loose cannon.
You don't know what he's going to say or do this afternoon, and neither does he.
Neither does he. Finally, I just want to remind people about Have It Out with Galloway. It goes out every Tuesday, 7 p.m. People know that. But what some people may seem to miss is that we record it on the Monday. So do register on haveitout.com so you can be part of the show and be on the video wall. And this week we are going to be joined by Francis Boyle.
Oh, wow, the
renowned,
legal man,
renowned American human rights lawyer about the ICJ on Palestine.
He's an interesting guy.
Very much so.
I look forward to it. I'll take you for chips later, though as a person of great goodwill, dropped us a note on Wednesday. How does Gayatri stay so slim after all those chips? It was a good one. She eats very sparingly. Okay, calls. Amin is in Denmark. Advice on Palestine, please. Amin, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to talk to you. You're a legend. Thank you very much for accepting my call. I just want to, there was a misunderstanding about the question. I wanted to ask you, as a refugee who lives in Europe, in the future, are we going to be hunted down? What can we do? What do you think the future is going to hold for us in Europe?
Not good, and I'm one of these that fights for the ability of refugees to return to their homes and their home countries and to build up their own society and their own country. That's the best thing for them. It's the best thing for their country of origin, and it's the best thing for their country that has received them. I appreciate that is not possible in many theatres. It is quite likely that the Syrian refugees, for example, will relatively soon be able to return to Syria, and I wish them Godspeed in that, because Syria is a great country, the Syrians are great people. It's heartbreaking that they should be on the dole, as it were, of Western countries as refugees. If you're from Gaza, you don't have much possibility of returning home to Gaza, so you're going to stay a refugee for quite some considerable time. So it depends where the refugee is from and what the prevailing conditions are. But in general, I'm not one of these who walks around waving a banner saying refugees are welcome here, because it celebrates the fact that people are refugees when we should be denouncing the circumstances that force people to take their lives in their hands, leave their families behind them, and set off across the world to live on somebody else's dole. That's not something to celebrate. As someone put it to me the other day, and it was a great slogan, if you want to stop the boats, you're going to have to stop the wars. It's a very good piece of wisdom. Last call of the evening, I suspect, is from the legend, Sarkar in Glasgow, on Starmer. Who he? I hear them asking all over the world, Sarkar. What a dismal start he's made.
Oh, George, thank you so much for your kind words. By the way, to answer your question, who he is, the biggest con man. short and sweet answer. I've kept it diplomatic. I could say worse, but family show. So I'll start with some of his amazing achievements in a space of few months. 400 odd seats. The guy could have done amazing things for the country. Could have in capitals. He did not fight back against the child benefit cap. He promoted that despite protesting against it. The winter fuel allowance. The man made that his manifesto. Now he's doing a U-turn on that. After ensuring Israel massacres Gaza Palestinians like anything they want, now he's doing some kind of an eyewash to say, oh, we're going to sell Israel arms, but it will be less than what we were selling. Wow. And on top of that, one of the biggest con job which he is doing is, he said he would never renege on the 2016 Brexit promise, because that was the referendum. I voted Brexit, despite being in Scotland and getting abuse from everywhere. He said he would honor that. But over the past few days, he's already started doing back-channel deals with the Germans, the French, with everyone, to get in some kind of agreement. Now, George, I don't know what's there to stop him. With 400-odd seats, with a rubbish Tories opposition, no one questioning him. But the good thing which I see is his own party members are going against him. But what needs to be done to stop all the nonsense which he is doing within the next 5 years, because he's got sort of carte blanche, George?
Well, he's put us into war with Russia, an undeclared war, but a war nonetheless. Our weapons and our special forces are deeply complicit in what are essentially terrorist operations inside the Russian border against Russian civilians, in breach of international law, in breach of British national law. He has deepened our involvement with Israel, not lessened it. He has stopped 9% of all the arms export licenses from British companies to Netanyahu's Murder Incorporated. That means that 91% of all licenses are to be continued and supplies to be fulfilled. And the 91% contain the most deadly of British ordnance going to Netanyahu. He has deepened, not lessened, our collaboration out of Cyprus on the intelligence level. And that's just Gaza. He has confronted in a way that embarrasses the American administration the Ukrainian situation. They are determined to be the most hostile to Russia and to China of any of America's allies. Now, you and I both know the answer to this question, Sarkar, but why is that in Britain's interest? How is it in Britain's interest as an island off the north coast of Europe with deep-seated structural economic problems, with a completely unbalanced economy between the City of London and the rest, most of the rest of the country, with mass poverty amongst our children and our old people in particular, with the public realm collapsing about our ears, with a national health service in many places, not here, but in many places, no longer fit for purpose, and in real danger of being privatized and taken down the American road. I could go on, you know. I could go on and on beyond the hour that I must close. This man has only been in office for less than 60 days, and he is already possibly the most unpopular Prime Minister that Britain has ever had. And he has announced, in case you were in any doubt, that things are going to get worse. Ha! Fasten your seatbelts, as they say. Apparently, he was playing football today in the worst football gear you have ever seen. Have we got it? Ah, there he is. Now, there is a man that should be playing for England, maybe the women's team. He's prancing there, is the only way I can describe it. You know, I'm a man of my age and class, so sometimes I say some things wrong, but he does not fill me with a sense that he's bursting with testosterone and is ready to mix it with the football adversaries, if you get my drift. In fact, if you put Mrs. Thatcher's handbag in his right hand, you wouldn't be surprised to see it. And by the way, these are the cleanest football boots ever photographed. Karaoke Star says this may be out of context, but why has the dodgy king been given a £45 million pay rise whilst pensioners are being frozen to death? What can I say to that? Nobby Plies says Starmer banning smoking in pub gardens after being to get out of my pub. Smokers outside pubs, sir. Thousands of them. Arcane Eclectic, what a wonderful name, says ban dual Israeli citizenship. I don't want Israelis hiding in my country behind my flag. A note of unity on which to end. If I offended anyone without testosterone, any man that carries a handbag, any fan of women's football, any Indigenous Americans, if I offended anybody who's deaf, dumb, or blind with some of my old-fashioned rhetoric, I should like to apologize and hope that you'll forgive me and come back on Have It Out with Galloway on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, unless you're on the show, in which case you better see me on Monday. And of course, I'll be back, God willing, on Wednesday for the midweek mother of all talk shows. I'm going to take my missus now for a big bag of chips. She puts mayonnaise on her chips. How very continental is that?
You did that one.